Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. We're going to do another edition of our Artist Retrospective series, or our History of show. Today we're going to do one that you guys have asked for, and it's a band that's very near and dear to my heart. That is Uriah Heep. So we're going to take a look at this long-standing, very important British band that actually got their start in 1969. So they were from England, obviously, I believe the Birmingham area of England. And actually, the kind of genesis of the band started with a band called Spice. So this was Mick Box and then eventually David Byron and a couple other musicians who started this band called Spice. They originally got the attention of the Vertigo label, okay, who signed the band, and they worked with a guy called David Braun, I believe. Right, David Braun, Jerry Braun, sorry. Who eventually would found Braun's Records. So kind of what happened is Jerry Braun, producer and band manager, okay, he's the one who assigned the band to Vertigo. They eventually changed their name to Uriah Heep from Spice. Where did the Uriah Heep name come from? Actually, it came from the Charles Dickens book, David Copperfield. Okay, it was a character in the book. So here they're signed to Vertigo, getting ready to do their debut album, which of course wound up being called Very Heavy, Very Humble. Okay, different cover art in the U.S. as opposed to the U.K. Basically, who's in the band at the time? So you got Mick Box on guitar, founder. You got David Byron on vocals. You've got Paul Newton on bass from the Gods. Okay, on keyboards and second guitar and backing vocals, you got Ken Hensley, also from the Gods, but before the Gods. He actually came from a band called Toe Fat, where he was singing and playing guitar. So basically, the Gods, a little bit of history there. So the Gods featured, Hensley and Newton. Mick Taylor was all from the Stones, was also briefly in the Gods, kind of like a psychedelic band from the late '60s. A little bits of prog in there too. Kind of a cool band actually, and it's kind of interesting that Spice and the Gods kind of came together to form Heep because it just made total sense. So there you have it. And on drums for that album, we had actually a bunch of guys played drums. The full-time player was Nigel Olsson, who some of you may remember also played in the early lineup of Elton John's band. Alex Napier also played some drums on the first album, and Keith Baker as well. And Colin Wood guested on some additional keyboards, but it was mostly Hensley on keyboards. So, this first album, one of the better debut albums of its time. So, again, we're looking at 1969. So, pretty damn heavy for the time. So, you hear a lot of talk about the originators of that kind of proto-metal, that heavy sound. So, you got Zeppelin, obviously. We're more coming from a blues rock frame point. You've got Deep Purple, who also blues, but a little bit of classical. And then you've got Black Sabbath, who took blues to the next level and, really got heavy with it. And then you had Uriah Heep, who also could get pretty heavy, but they were more kind of coming from a psychedelic background. So it was kind of like, heavy rock, that proto-metal sound, progressive rock, which in 1969 really wasn't a thing. You had King Crimson and the Moody Blues, and then Yes, and then Genesis, and those type of bands kind of figuring out what this prog thing was, and really for the first time coming up with this new type of sound. So Heep were doing a little bit of that. Like I said, the psychedelic aspect of it, but the Heep could also do a little bit of the blues, and they had some boogie as well. So you kind of had this meeting of all these styles, which, really worked, and it just was something totally different. Critics hated it, right? Critics totally hated Uriah Heep, especially early on. Probably most of their career, they've never been fans of the critics, but the fans really jumped on board because, again, it was something different. So you had these four bands. You had Zeppelin, Sabbath, Purple, and Heep. Those were the big four that kind of really started that whole heavy movement. As far as like popular bands that were signed to like major labels and what have you. So this first album, Gypsy, again, heavy Hammond organ, crunchy guitar, high-pitched wailing vocals. David Byron, pretty unique singer. It's kind of interesting that, Heep and Purple hit it big around the same time, and both had singers who could really hit the upper registers. And in fact, if you ever go and read any biographies or autobiographies on Queen, and you listen to and read some of the early interviews of Freddie Mercury, David Byron was actually a really big influence on him. And you can kind of hear that. So Gypsy, Walking in Your Shadow, Come Away Melinda, what else? Dream Mare, Real Turned On, I'll Keep on Trying, Wake Up, Set Your Sights. The U.S. version had a great tune called Bird of Prey. If you get the remaster of this, they've remastered the Heep catalog so many times, but it comes to a lot of cool, like, B-sides and leftovers and things like that. But again, the birth of the Uriah Heep sound started right there. So fast forward to 1970. That was actually 1970. Sorry, the band formed in 69. 1970 was the debut album. So 1971, Salisbury. Again, different cover art for the U.S. versus the UK. The US album had this kind of interesting looking creature on the front. Here you got the guys in a tank. I kind of dig this one, although I actually had the LP of the US, obviously, because I'm from the US. So here we've got basically Keith Baker, who also appeared on Very Humble, takes over the full-time role from Napier on the drums. Otherwise, the lineup basically stays the same. So what do we got on here? We've got, so now Bird of Prey is featured on here. You've got The Park, Time to Live, Lady in Black, a song that the band still plays to this day. High Priestess, a really good heavy rock tune. And then the lengthy Salisbury, which is just about 20 minutes, I think, or thereabouts. Pretty cool album. That's as prog as you get. Got all sorts of cool orchestrations and ripping Mick Box wah-wah guitar solo. Just a really, really cool tune. And then on the remaster, you get some bonus tracks, Simon the Bullet Freak, Here Am I, and all sorts of other stuff. Very, very cool album. One of the most underrated albums, I think, in the Uriah Heep discography. Okay, from there, we are going to jump ahead to later that year. So, again, this is the 70s, right? So a lot of these bands were doing 1, 2, sometimes 3 albums a year. That was not unheard of. So this is perhaps my favorite album in the Uriah Heep discography, especially from the early years. Just for whatever reason, I've always really gravitated toward this album. It's one of their heavier ones. This is called Look at Yourself. Okay, again, you got slightly different cover art for the US version. This is the UK remaster. The title track, Look at Yourself, very heavy, epic tune. I Want to Be Free, July Morning. It's probably their first, epic tune that really caught the attention of the public. Tears in My Eyes, real cool, heavy kind of boogie rocker. Shadows of Grief, real menacing, doomy tune. What Should Be Done, and Love Machine, a great, up-tempo boogie rocker. And then bonus tracks, you got an outtake from the sessions called Why. Really, really great tune, which should have made the damn album. But, back in the day, you had 2 sides of vinyl, and you had roughly 35, 40 minutes tops to play with. So a great album, my personal favorite from the Uriah Heep discography. All right, so also for that album, we more changes. Ian Clark joins on drums, and Manfred Mann from Man for Man's Earth Band, obviously, contributes Moog guitar solo on July Morning. It was also with the Look at Yourself album that the band moved from Vertigo to Bronze Records. So I mentioned earlier that Jerry Braun had started up. He moved off from Vertigo, started his own record label called Bronze Records, and he took Uriah Heep with him. So he kind of had Heep under his wing as manager and producer for all those years. So we're going to go to 1972. The big breakthrough for the band, okay, and this is probably for most fans their most well-known and popular album. It's of course Demons and Wizards. Oh, let's get that damn glare there. There we go. And Roger Dean cover art, an album filled with classics: The Wizard, Traveler in Time, Easy Living, their most well-known song, was actually a pretty big radio hit. Poets Justice, Circle of Hands, Rainbow Demon, my favorite song of the album, one of their heaviest tunes. All My Life, Paradise, and The Spell, also great. And then you've also got in the bonus tracks here on the remaster, you've got an extended version of Why, an unreleased edit of Rainbow Demon, Proud Words on a Dusty Shelf, Home Again to You, Green Eye, some really cool non-album outtakes and leftover tracks, right? So lineup changes by this time, okay. Mark Clark briefly comes in and replaces Newton on bass. But then, when it's time to get to the tour and everything like that, Gary Thane actually comes in from the Keith Hartley band and replaces Mark Clark on bass. He would remain in the band for a number of years, actually probably their most well-known bassist and a great bassist in his own right. And then from the Gods and Tofat, we've also got Lee Kerslake, who comes in full-time on drums here, and he replaces Ian Clark. So again, this is the genesis of the classic lineup of Uriah Heep for the Demons and Wizards album. All right, so 1973, we've got the live album. Hold on here, getting all mixed up in my stuff here. Okay, well, before the live album, hold on. Before the live album, we've got The Magician's Birthday, okay? So basically, 1972, we've got Demons and Wizards and The Magician's Birthday. So as you can see, again, they're doing like kind of 2 albums a year. So basically, this kind of cements that classic lineup again. You've got Sunrise, another big hit for the band. Spider Woman, a good up-tempo rocker. Blind Eye, Echoes in the Dark, Rain, pretty cool ballad. Sweet Lorraine, another really popular tune for the band. Tales, and of course the title track, The Magician's Birthday, another kind of epic, kind of proggy tune. So, you know, bonus tracks here: Crystal Ball, Silver White Man, Proud Words, Echoes in the Dark. A lot of cool stuff. Again, another Roger Dean art job here. Probably, again, their number 2 most respected and popular albums. So, all right, so now we're going to go to 1973. I was getting a little ahead of myself before. So they decided to release a live album because that's what bands did back then. And here's the remaster. So you pull it out of the sleeve, and those of you who have the album will recognize that classic live album cover. Basically, the band firing on all cylinders, okay, with that lineup. They've run through most of their best tunes from those first handful of albums. So Sunrise, Sweet Lorraine, Traveler in Time, Easy Living, July Morning, Tears in My Eyes, Gypsy, Circle of Hands, Look at Yourself, The Magician's Birthday, Love Machine, the Rock and Roll Medley, which they like to do, which comprise Roll Over Beethoven, Blue Suede Shoes, Mean Woman Blues, Hound Dog, At the Hop, Whole Lot of Shaking Going On, and Blue Suede Shoes again to round it off. So they kind of did this kind of like cool like 50s thing. And then if you get the remaster, you've got some additional BBC radio show stuff, as well as other live tracks from the same time period. So Something or Nothing, I Won't Mind, Look at Yourself, Gypsy, so on and so forth. A very, very cool live album. In my opinion, one of the most underrated live albums of the early mid-70s. Band is riding high at that point. So, all right, now we're going to fast forward to later that year, 1973. Basically the same lineup, okay, produced Sweet Freedom. Very underrated album, in my opinion. It's got some great tunes on here. Dreamer, Stealin', another song the band still plays live to this day. One Day, another kind of really epic hard rock tune. The title track, great up-tempo rocker. If I Had the Time, 7 Stars, pretty quirky, fun tune. Circus and Pilgrim, all great songs. And then a bonus track I left over from this album, which how this was left off the album, I'll never know, but a tune called Sunshine. Very heavy tune. Very heavy tune. Again, another great, great album. You know, what else we got here? King Biscuit Flower Hour. You know, they've done a million live albums. This is a really good one. So it's right around the same time period. This is actually done in early February 1974 from San Diego. Running through a lot of their great tunes. All right. Definitely a good one to check out. And then we're going to go ahead to 1974, that same year as that live album, for the Wonderworld album. Pretty interesting cover art there. For here, you're starting to see a little bit of cracks in the band, right? So the successful formula is starting to wear a little thin. Some of the members are developing alcohol and drug problems. So, but the album itself, you got the title track, really good. Suicidal Man, great hard rocker. Shadow in the Wind, So Tired, good boogie rocker. The Easy Road, nice heavy blues rocker. Something or Nothing, good typical Heap tune with the great vocal harmonies. I Won't Mind, We Got We, and Dreams, another great tune. And so, you know, this was the last album with Gary Thane. Basically, on the tour, when they're playing in Texas, they're playing during an electrical storm, and he got an electrical shock. It's out of commission for a little while. That was kind of like the beginning and the end for him, because he had already had a heroin problem at the time, which only got worse with him being off the shelf with his injuries from getting shocked on stage. And he wound up getting fired in 1975 from the band, and he eventually succumbed to a heroin overdose later that year. So it all came kind of tumbling down for Gary Thame very, very quickly. It's a shame. He's a great bass player, great fit for this band. So that's the Wonderworld album. All right. Also, right around that same time, we got the Uriah Heep live at Shepperton Studios live album. Not the greatest sounding live album in the world. The set list is great. The band sounds fantastic on here, but the quality of the recording is kind of shitty. But if you're a completist for Heep, you got to have this one. Then I'm going to go to an album that I think is really, really fantastic, and one of those albums that I've enjoyed more and more over the years, even though it doesn't really get its due a lot. It's Return to Fantasy from 1975. Again, we've got a brand new bass player on board. It happens to be John Lawton, fresh from his stints in King Crimson and Roxy Music. Also, he played with Family and Mogul Thrash. So he joins on bass guitar, backing vocals. I'm sure for Lawton it was kind of a switch to have to go from being the singer in the band for King Crimson, although he wasn't a lead singer in Roxy Music, but being more of a sideman here. But it worked. Got some great tunes on here. The title track, Return to Fantasy, is fantastic. Shady Lady, Devil's Daughter, another really good heavy rocker. Beautiful Dream, Prima Donna, Your Turn to Remember, Showdown, Why Did You Go, and A Year or a Day, plus a bunch of bonus tracks. Shout It Out, Time Will Come, Beautiful Dream, and another Return to Fantasy edit. Dig this album a lot. If you're a fan of the old Heep stuff but you don't have this album, you need to get it. All right, fast forward a year. We've got the High and Mighty. So by this time, the band is having issues with David Byron. So he's always kind of like a wild and crazy guy, but he started to develop a pretty serious alcohol problem, which was really hampering his performance on stage. So if you look at any of the live footage from Heep from that era, 75, 76, you can start to see that he was kind of overindulging a little bit. So basically after this album, which also features John Lawton on lead vocals on one tune, on the first tune, One Way or Another, which is actually really cool, and you have to wonder what it would have sounded like if he would have just taken over lead vocals in the band. But you got One Way or Another, Weep in Silence, Misty Eyes, good tune, Midnight, Can't Keep a Good Band Down, Woman of the World, Footprints in the Snow, Can't Stop Singing, Make a Little Love, and Confession. Great tune. And then a couple bonus tracks. You got Name of the Game and Sundown. A solid album. Probably, out of all the ones we've just mentioned, probably the weakest, but still a good album, I think. But in addition to the band getting rid of Byron at this point, they actually fired him from the band for, he just was getting too hard to deal with. He would then go on to form a band called Rough Diamonds with Clem Clemson from of Humble Pie and a bunch of other dudes, known guys from the industry, to do an album, which not too shabby, pretty good, sort of Heepish, but, kind of like a combination of Heep and Humble Pie, maybe a little mellower than the two. By this time, John Lawton had already decided that this was not the gig for him, and I think the band kind of felt the same way, so they parted ways. So the band had some work to do, right? So here we go. We're going to fast forward to 1977. So basically, Lawton's gone. He goes and joins UK, or forms UK, I should say. Trevor Bolder, ex of David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust band, know him well, who he actually be a mainstay in the band until his death a couple years ago, joins, as well as John Lawton, ex of Lucifer's Friend, a great band, a great early heavy rock band from kind of like a German-British band. So John Lawton comes in. He doesn't have the look. So you had David Byron, who had the mustache and the long flowing black hair, totally looked the rock star part. And then you got Lawton, who is, pretty balding on top, short, small guy, kind of like the frizzy hair. Didn't really look the part, but man, could this guy sing. Pipes of Doom. Totally different singer than Byron, though. He had more of like a kind of really strong bluesy voice. I believe they also interviewed and auditioned David Coverdale from Deep Purple for the lead singer role. So anyway, out comes the album Firefly, 1977. Solid album. I think all the trio albums from the Lawton period are very, very solid, but they're very different. So the band's kind of moving away from that kind of mysticism and that psychedelic prog heavy rock thing into more of like a traditional hard rock and boogie and pop direction. Okay, so here you've got some strong tunes: The Hanging Tree, Been Away Too Long, Who Needs Me, Wise Man, Do You Know, Rolling On, Sympathy, and Firefly. Plus you got Crime of Passion and Do You Know, A Far Better Way, and Wise Man, all on the bonus tracks on the remaster. a good album. Like I said, I like all the Wetton era album. I mean, sorry, all the Lawton era albums. I just don't hold them as near and dear as some of the early ones, but they're still pretty solid. A lot of really good, strong tracks. So again, so Lawton and Boulder joined the fray. That lineup would stay the same for 77's Innocent Victim. Oh, you'll notice. There we go. I like this album a lot. This actually was one of, when I was a kid, first starting to get into Heep. This was actually one of the first 3 albums I got from them. So I actually like this a lot. There's some good stuff on here, but there's some really mellow stuff. I think kind of like the influence of like the growing California rock scene was starting to permeate the music of Heep a little bit, specifically Ken Hensley and his writing. So you've got, Keep on Riding, Flying High, Roller, Free and Easy is probably one of the heaviest tunes this band has ever done. Really, really great rocker. But some of the other ones are just kind of more like kind of breezy, kind of poppy tunes with a little folk influence. Free Me is another great tune. What else do we have here? Choices, great prog tune on there. And then you've got on the bonus tracks, you've got Illusion, a 2-part Illusion tune, Illusion Masquerade, which is really, really cool, and an Outtake of River. I like this tune. So this again is it's the UK cover. The US cover was that bad boy right there. I used to have that on LP. All these live shots of the band, which is pretty cool. So again, that same lineup then follows up with it. This is the last album in the Lawton lineup. This is Fallen Angel from 1978. It's got a really cool tune called Woman of the Night on there. Fallen in Love is another great tune. One More Night, Put Your Lovin' on Me, Come Back to Me, What Do You Say, Save It, Love or Nothing, I'm Alive, and Fallen Angel, plus Cheater, Give Me Love, A Right to Live, and Been Hurt. A lot of bonus tracks. So they were recording a lot of, you had to love that they recorded all these extra tunes on a lot of these sessions, and then they eventually got released. Some of them are actually pretty good. A solid album. Again, you can start to see the cracks again of this lineup coming through. And a cool live album. I've had this in my collection for a million years. Live in 1979. Okay, this is like the final vestiges of the Lawton lineup. They run through a lot of, this is an old Castle Communications. Remember them? Castle Communications. There we go. A good collection of tunes from the really old days in the Lawton era. Good live album. Underrated. All right, so from there, 1980. So Lawton gets fired. John Sloman comes in from Lone Star. He would also, you'd remember him from Gary Moore, short stint in Gary Moore. He comes in on vocals. By this point, Lee Kerslake has kind of had enough, and I think he was having some issues with management and the shuffling lineup, and he's just like, I need to leave. So, of course, he goes off to join Ozzy Osbourne's Blizzard of Oz. Chris Slade from Man for Man's Earth Band comes in for the album Conquest. Also at this time, I think Mr. Oh boy, I'm drawing a complete blank on his name. Ken Hensley, that's it. Ken Hensley at this point in time, I think, was kind of at odds with the rest of the band because I think there were some jealousies going on, that he was writing all the material, and he was very steadfast in wanting his songs to be featured on the albums. The rest of the band didn't necessarily like some of the direction of some of the songwriting, and then Hensley had an issue with Sloman. He didn't feel he was a right singer for the band, so they did the album, and then the band basically just kind of splintered from there, and Ken Hensley left, never to return again, actually, other than some guest spots here and there. So the band puts out the album, goes on a tour, splinters, and you've got Mick Box, the last man standing, right? So let's fast forward a little bit. So the band takes a little bit of a hiatus to kind of regroup, or at least Mick Box does. And he decides he's going to put together a new band, completely new band. He's going to sign up with, Bronze is now working with Mercury Records, so he gets a deal with them for the album Abominog. A great early 80s hard rock and metal album. A re-energized, rejuvenized, revitalized Uriah Heep with Box, ex-trapeze vocalist Peter Golby, okay, John Sinclair from the Heavy Metal Kids, the Babies, and Savoy Brown on keyboards, Bob Daisley, okay, who was in Ozzy's Blizzard of Oz, okay, along with Rainbow and Widowmaker, and Bob brought along Lee Kerslake. I should actually say Lee Kerslake brought along Bob Daisley. So they both were jettisoned from Ozzy's Blizzard of Oz. So Lee is back in the band. They put out this album. Pretty good seller. A lot of great tunes on here. Too Scared to Run, Chasing Shadows. On the Rebound was actually a good FM hit for them here in this country. Hot Night in a Cold Town, Running All Night with the Lion, That's the Way That It Is. Another pretty good big hit for the band. Prisoner, Hot Persuasion, Sell Your Soul and Think It Over. The bonus track, Son of a Bitch, Tin Soldier, take on the Small Faces tune. Think It Over, Too Scared to Run, Sell Your Soul, and That's the Way That It Is. Live version. So a really good album, a really heavy album with a, this is one of those, even though I was already into the Heap at the time, I saw this album cover and I'm like, I gotta have it. Gotta have it. Nice big LP. So pretty cool. So the band starts touring, all over the place. A lot of buzz with this album. And they would follow it up pretty quickly in 1983 with Head First. Okay. They did a big tour with Blue Oyster Cult here in the States, which I happened to see. Basically the same lineup for the album, although Trevor Bolder would come back to join on bass when Bob Daisley went and rejoined Ozzy's band. So, Other Side of Midnight, Stay on Top, Lonely Nights, Sweet Talk, Love is Blind, Roll Overture, Red Lights, Rollin' the Rock, Straight Through the Heart, Weekend Warriors, all sorts of really, really good tunes. Again, another just kind of contemporary, good, commercial, heavy rock album for Uriah Heep. So now we go to 1985. So the band was doing a lot of touring at the time. They wound up leaving Mercury Records and signing a deal with Portrait, which was a division of CBS, for the Equator album, basically the same lineup. Probably one of the weakest albums in their canon, along with the Conquest album. This is just it's mid-'80s, so you can just imagine like all of the synth pop and new wave stuff that was very popular at the time. This is just a very keyboard-driven, really, really commercial album. And, a couple good tunes. Rock-A-Rama's pretty good. Bad Blood's pretty good. Poor Little Rich Girl's not bad. Golby is just a great singer. I think Golby really fit well with this band. Really great voice. And it's amazing how he hasn't really done much since. But yeah, it just kind of this, again, brought the band to kind of start to splinter once again. So year later, Sinclair and Golby are gone. New guys coming into the band, right? So in 1986, we've got two former Grand Prix members. So you got Bernie Shaw on vocals and Phil Lanzon on keyboards. And Bernie also happened to be he also was in Praying Mantis briefly in the early 80s. So you got these two new guys joining the band. So they started the touring cycle again, getting out there on the road, playing a lot of the old hits and classics. But it wasn't till 1989 that they actually went to the studio, recorded and released Raging Silence. Very, very strong out. So here's the brand new lineup of the band. And we got Blood Red Roses, Rich Kid, Lifeline, great tune, Voice on My TV, Cry Freedom, Bad Bad Man, More Fool You, When the War is Over, Rough Justice, Hold Your Head Up, which is a remake of the old Argent tune. They do a really good job of that. And a kind of a remaking of the Look at Yourself song. Okay. Very, very strong album that kind of jettisoned Heap into the, into the 1990s. And then a host of albums coming up in the years to come. So we've got Different World with this same lineup. Okay. Not a great album. Pretty good. Then you've got the Sea of Light album, which is fantastic. Roger Dean's first work with the band in quite some time. A lot of really, really good tunes on here. Again, the same lineup of Box, Kerslake, Boulder, Lanzon, and Shaw. A lot of really strong tunes. This is actually one of their stronger albums of the later period. And then you've got live album Spellbinder. Okay. Good stuff. And you got Sonic Origami, another really, really solid album. So as you can see, the band has been very, very busy, since they've kind of regrouped with the new lineup. So here's something. You know what? Actually, I'm going to talk about this last. Let's get through all the newer stuff. So then you've got they went into the studio and redid a lot of their classics with the then current lineup called Celebration. Why not? Everybody's doing it. Let's let our fans hear what the current lineup sounds like going into the studio and doing all those Byron and Lawton era classics. Then we've got Wake the Sleeper, which came out in 2008. This was at the time their first new studio album in a few years. And by this point, Lee Kerslake has decided he needs to retire. He's had enough of the touring and the recording and all that kind of stuff. And that brought in Russell Gilbrook on drums, fantastic drummer. This is a great album. The title track, Overland, Tears of the World, just one like anthem after another. Heaven and Rain, Book of Lies, What Kind of God, Ghost of the Ocean. That's just a great album. I remember when that album came out, it was just so great to be a Heep fan because they're just a strong material. They continued that with Into the Wild, another really, really strong album. And, you know, by this time we've got, you know, Trevor Bolder passes away in 2013. And, you know, a really sad loss from cancer. And he was replaced by Dave Rimmer in 2014. And let's see, so what do we got here? We got the Outsider album, another really, really strong album. Speed of Sound, 1 Minute, The Law, The Outsider, Rock the Foundation. Is Anybody Gonna Help Me? Looking at You. Great tunes. I've actually seen them live a bunch of times on tours for these more recent albums, and just really can't go wrong. They still really bring it to this day. And, you know, the Totally Driven, they re-released this recently. Totally Driven, some acoustic and live stuff, which is pretty neat. But the one thing I say for last that I did want to talk about, so this was released a number of years ago. This is called Uriah Heep, the Lansdowne tapes. This is basically a lot of those early recordings when the band were still calling themselves Spice, as well as like a lot of like rarities and odds and ends and things. If you're like a fan of Heep from the early days, you need this. All sorts of rarities and cool things that you know, you're just going to want to have and to hear. So, you know, with that, Heep is in the studio finishing up a new album for 2018. It's called, I think, Live the Dream. Can't wait to hear it. I'm sure it's going to be great. And, you know, I'm just happy that they've given us all these years, got close to 50 years worth of music. We're going on 50 years, just shy of it. And they show no signs of slowing down, and that's a really good thing. So, again, one of the most important bands ever. You know, screw the critics. I think most Uriah Heep fans will agree that they are one of the most important bands of all time. Definitely one of my favorites, and so happy that they've been giving us all this music for all these years. So that is our Uriah Heep extravaganza. It's hard to so many albums. This is a long episode here, but hope you enjoyed it. We've got more of these coming up. We're going to do one on Triumph real soon. We're going to do a Deep Purple one, a Sabbath one. I'm sure there's a million other bands we can do. So whatever you want to see, let me know, and I'll put it into my queue. Till next time, I am Pete Pardo from Sea Tranquility. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and of course, we're here on the Mighty YouTube. See you next time.